So welcome everybody to today's session. I'm Rachel from Secret Source, and today we're going to be giving you the 5 questions to ask if you're about to enter an outsourcing relationship. So in case you don't know us, Secret Source is an IT outsourcing agency based in Spain, and we've built our company following years of experience working at and with traditional outsourcers. So we know the questions to ask to make outsourcing or nearshoring or staff augmentation, whatever you want to call it, a good experience for everyone. So just to introduce you to who's speaking today, I'm Rachel. So I'm currently the CEO of Secret Source, but I started about 5 years ago as a project manager. So I know what it's like to run a project as well as run a successful outsourcing company. And we've also got Sarah. So she looks after our client relationships and represents their interests. So she'll be giving a few real world examples as we go along. And just a final thing before we get started, if you've got any questions today, please add them on Slido. So if you just go to slido.com and enter the code on the screen, or I think we'll be posting a link in the chat now, then you can just add your questions there. You can add them anonymously, and then other people can vote for kind of the ones that they think are the most interesting. And that's it. Over to you, Sarah.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. And hi, everyone. So let's get started. As Rachel said, we are Secret Source. We are an outsourcer, and I'm not about to give a sales pitch. That's not what we're doing here. But the point of this is that we've been asked lots of very difficult questions from clients ourselves, and those questions have helped shape how we like to do business, what we think is important for an outsourcer and for clients. And we want to share those secrets, the way we work with you. Outsourcing can be a fantastic tool, a really good strategy. It's a way that you can get top talent into your organization without the headache of HR, management, training, and often for less money than hiring locally. It's a really positive thing for business to be able to expand the talent pool of people who can come and work in your organization. And the same for developers, the opportunity to work on projects, almost in any geography outside of where you live. But outsourcing often gets quite a negative connotation. And that's because people have had bad experiences. And we find that those bad experiences are where expectations don't align. And that's why we want to share with you 5 questions to ask. 5 questions to ask when you are outsourcing to help make sure that expectation is agreed between the two of you and the experience is really good. So let's get started. And the first question that I would say that you should be asking when you are looking to start an outsourcing relationship is asking the outsourcer how they define senior developer, how they assess their developers. We very often get requests from clients who say, I need a couple of senior React developers. I need a couple of intermediate JavaScript developers. What does that mean? And if you don't have that definition, it sounds obvious, but this is where problems can creep in. That if your expectation of what that seniority means, what that capability means, perhaps you're not getting the right individuals. I might consider myself good at Excel, but what does that mean? What functionality in that application am I good at? Do I know the whole thing, or do I just know bits of it really, really well? And I would be asking, what is your process for rating ability? Do you have one? Does the outsourcer have a way of grading ability? If they have multiple React developers, do they have a way of being able to say why one is more senior than the other? And is it that they're taking that developer's word for it? I can say I'm an expert at something, but, how am I proving that? How many years experience do I have on a project? And years of experience is quite often used as a good way of measuring, tenure and capability, but not necessarily. It doesn't always mean that you are necessarily senior or expert, and it doesn't take into account things like soft skills. These are really, really important skills as well. It's not just about having someone writing code. Do you want someone who has the seniority to be able to review code, or someone who can push back and challenge ideas and make suggestions of ways that the project could be done differently, different approaches, understanding of different technologies and tools that could be brought in to help? So, there are many different concepts that are really important here. It's not just about senior developer or appending the title. It's how you evaluate it. What we do here is we have what we call our professional ladder. When we hire people, and twice a year, we look at our ladder, which rates everybody from an intern to technical lead, and rates on a technical as well as soft skills basis. We do this for two reasons. Firstly, as a developer, it gives them a view of these are the skills that I need for each level. And if I want to progress in my career, I've got a very clear idea of what skills I need to develop so that I can move forward. But also for clients, we share this with them. And I have clients who we work with, and I can say, I've got a really good level 12 developer, and they know exactly what that means, because we actually have a charter and a document that explains technically and soft skills wise what that person can and can't do. And it's just a really easy way for us to have that conversation. I know you might have an outsourcer who does it differently, but whatever way they do it, I would be asking that question. What is the way that they really define what those capabilities are? Just so that when someone starts on your project, you're really clear what their capabilities are and aren't before you move forward. So that's the first question that I would be asking, how you define capability. Second question that I would be asking is around tenure. Will I have the same developers for my project? What you're asking really is about what the outsourcer's view is to maintaining developers on a project long term. We specialize quite often in long-term projects, multiple year. If you're working on a project that's even just 1 year in length, you don't really want to have new developers starting all of the time or developers leaving continually. People leave jobs, that's a fact. But we did a webinar a few months back on why people leave. Quite often you will have an outsourcer say, we have a pool of developers, and if someone leaves, we can replace them instantly or within 1 or 2 weeks. But you don't really want people leaving the project, because when people leave, lack of tenure can cause a problem on a project. You're losing the knowledge and capabilities of those developers, but you're also having to incur the time and the complexity of training up somebody else to join that project. It's not a benefit if over the course of a year, you're continually having different people joining that team. So to gauge how the outsourcer feels about this, I would be asking that question, will I have the same developers for the duration? Another way you could ask it is, for the developers that you're proposing, what projects have they worked on over the last 2 to 3 years? If they're giving you a list of sort of 7, 8, 9 projects, you can sort of do the maths and think, okay, they move around a lot. For a short-term projects, it's fine. But if you are looking for a minimum term of a year for a project, you really want to have employees that stay on that project, and that you're keeping that skill, the experience with you during that project duration. So I would be asking these questions, absolutely. What is your view about keeping people on the project? In our company, we have developers who have worked with the same project for sort of 5, 6, 7 years. The way we do it is actually quite simple. We ask our clients and we ask our developers every month, how happy are you? Red, amber, green. And we do it just as like a litmus test, a pulse test. Are you happy? Because realistically, people don't just leave. There is a feeling that's been brewing for a while. They might want to do something different. So by checking in, we are trying to stay ahead of that. And if, the developer wants to do something different, we can work with them on that. But what we try to do is ensure that they're happy working on their project. That's how we handle it. And, our record speaks for itself of having developers that have been on projects long term. But I would definitely be asking that question. What are you doing to try and keep my project team focused on my project for its duration, or certainly as long as possible? So that's number 2. Third question, who will manage the project, and what skills do they have to do that? Do they have the right skills? This is an interesting question, because sometimes we see developers as being like the only project team that the client will think of. I need a team of 3 developers, 5 developers. And yes, the developers are there to write code, but the code is part of an overall project. Who is managing that? Who is responsible for that? And are they the right person to be managing a proper project with, deadlines, budgets, and so forth? The reason we ask this is because project management is a really integral part of making sure that these projects are successful. We have project managers. So, we provide developers, but we also provide project managers, real project managers that have accreditations in Scrum and Prince and ITIL, that really understand how to manage projects. Where we've seen challenges has been where client will say, I'll provide a project manager. And that's absolutely fine. We're very happy to work with organizations who provide their own project managers. They have to be a real project manager, not just, the IT manager who doesn't really understand the time and budgetary constraints of running a project, but also how to manage the whole agile process, assigning tasks to developers. It's a really, really crucial thing to make sure that that project runs smoothly and successfully. Orchestrating stand-ups, retrospectives, it's a full-time job. So it's definitely a consideration that sometimes we see the clients don't think of. They just think of the code. They're not thinking of the whole project as a whole and who will manage that. This question can also bring about other questions aside from just the coding. Do you need to have UX or UI design? Is there certain other elements like that? Do you need QA? Do you need DevOps? There are other skills that you might need only for a very temporary basis. Do you have an outsourcer who can bring that to you, or will you need to also go and look for those skills? We have all of these skills in-house, and it's one of the questions that we ask. Even if the client is only asking for a small team of developers, we'll always make it very clear that all of these other skills are quite often required in a project. And as I say, they can be part-time basis. It doesn't have to be for the duration of the project. But asking that question before you start, who will be managing that project day to day? And does that person have all of the skills in-house? That's number 3. So going to move to number 4. And the question I would be asking is, what language do you speak in-house? And communication is what this is all about. We've all had experience of working with maybe an outsourcer or a freelancer where maybe the level of English is challenging. Communication is the key for successful projects. And I've worked with outsourcing organizations who've said, all of our teams speak great English, and they don't. And I'm sure some of you may have had similar experiences. So the question is really not just about, how well do you speak English, but do you evaluate that? And actually, what is your language of business? What is spoken day to day? And we found that has been a real key difference. The way we handle it, all of our developers are accredited to have B2 in English. So they actually have a certificate. They've sat an exam to test their English capability. We interview in English as well, so that we get a feel when we're hiring that we can have a conversation and also assess the language level. But we do business in English. All of our Slack is in English. Our team meetings are in English. And it's a really good way to be able to illustrate that, yes, we do have a really good competence of the language. We evaluate and assess, but we also operate day to day in English. This is really important because it's about communication. This is a deal breaker. If you are introducing new people into your team, to your project, and they can't communicate clearly, it's going to become a problem. And I've had experience where there's been one person in the team who speaks English, and they sort of translate for the others. And it's not a sustainable practice. It doesn't work that way. Because then those team members don't integrate. They can't integrate with the team. They can't join in the chat. They also can't push back. They can't raise ideas. They can't contribute fully if they don't have the ability to communicate with everybody. And it's really, really important to have that. Particularly if you have a multinational team, or you happen to be based somewhere where there's quite a strong dialect. This question was actually put to us from one of our clients. They're based in the Midlands in the UK, There's a regional accent there, and it was important to them. We want to have a team of people that can understand us, that can communicate with us. And they asked us this question, do you work in English day to day? Yes, we do, and we can show you that. And that helped make them feel really confident that those individuals would be able to integrate with the team. So this is definitely something that I would be asking. It's not just about everyone speaks English, it's the competency and the day-to-day familiarity of doing business in English. It's one thing to be able to have a bit of chit chat and talk about what you did at the weekend, but if you need to explain to someone something quite technically complex, a problem that's happened with the project, a delay to the work, it's a really critical thing to be able to communicate clearly and competently. This is really important to make sure that this is all agreed up front before the project starts in earnest. So that's number 4, all around language. And so my final one, number 5, this might seem sort of obvious, but who else have you worked with? Absolutely, this should be a question that you put to an outsourcer. Who else similar to us have you worked with, or projects of a similar size and a similar scale? The key things I'd be looking for here are names and examples of clients, but also how current they are. They're giving you examples of clients that are maybe 10 years old. Do they list these clients on their website? Or are there public evidences of those projects that you can read about and see what they did and how long it's taken, the size of the teams, the benefits, etc. And I'd also ask for a reference call. Take a feel for how long does it take to get that set up? Is it an easy process? Is there any pushback? We offer reference calls with existing clients. We have case studies, and it's a simple process to just give a little bit of peace of mind. And it's also a good way that you can get a feel of, what industries does this outsourcer have expertise in? Where are they strong? How long have they been working in certain areas and sectors? So I would certainly be asking this question: who else have you been working with? Can you share some evidence of those projects? And can I speak to someone? So there are our top 5 questions. I'm going to give you one more bonus one. So you've had 5, but you get 1 for free. And that would be to ask what the ITsec policy is. This is something that we learned in this business, is that you're working with another organization's data. This is really, really important, that even if that organization themselves, even if you are not raising this, this is something very, very serious. So I would be asking the outsourcer, do you have any policy around how data from the client is being used, being secured? And I would be asking, are they just saying that they do, or do they have any proof? So we conform to ISO 27001. We have a certificate that says that. I would be asking for this. Do they have that? What this is really showing is that that organization has invested in ISMS. They have been trained, they understand security risk, they understand data security. And it's just, it's just a fail-safe policy that your data is secure, and the people that you're working with or will be working with you understand, due diligence of data. It's something that can be very often missed, but it's really important to get clear up front that, they understand how to take care of sensitive data. We've worked with projects with organizations like NHS or with local government, where these things are really, really important. But for any project, this needs to be really, really clear up front. If you're working with sensitive data or personal data, there needs to be a policy about how that is handled. So that's it. Those are our 5 questions. So just to recap, I would be asking how developers are assessed, whether you'll get the same developers throughout the course of your project, who will manage the project, what language you do business, what language is spoken in-house, and who else are you working with and have you worked with? The bonus question about information security policy. So that's it. Those are our questions to ask your outsourcer. Just to reiterate, as I say, we are a nearshore agency. We're based in the Canary Islands. We've got many years of experience of doing this. That's why we wanted to share this with you guys today. Outsourcing is a great tool. It opens up your hiring pool massively. But by asking the right questions, you can help make sure that that relationship is even more successful for you. Now, I'd love to take some questions. Hopefully you've been putting some questions into Slido as we've gone along. If you haven't, you've still got time now to go and ask your questions. I'm very happy to have open questions about absolutely anything. But before we move to Q&A, I just want to share with you, if you want to keep in touch with us, learn a bit more about us, we are on LinkedIn. If you want to chat with me about anything that we've spoken about today, you can book some time in my diary. There's my Calendly link, or just send me an email. And myself and Rachel will be more than happy to just have a conversation with you about anything you've spoken or you've heard about today. And with that.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. That was great.
No
yeah, lots of tips, really informative. Let's go on to the Q&A. We've got a couple of good ones in here. So yeah, the first one, I think it's a really good one. Is it appropriate to ask an outsourcer if they subcontract work?
Do you want me to answer that, or?
Yeah, well, I think it's a good question, and I would say yes, absolutely. Yeah.
No.
I think I've heard a lot of horror stories about people who've worked with outsourcing agencies, and maybe the developer kind of disappears before a project's finished, or when it's finished, and they offer no support, or are generally kind of unreliable. And I think this can happen when you've got an agency that's subcontracting out to freelancers. So you definitely want to look for if it's important to you to have that stability and reliability, look for an agency that's employing people full time. I think it's really important.
Yeah, I'll add to that. We quite often invite our clients out to our offices, and that's another thing you could always do is, even if you don't actually mean to follow through with it, ask them about coming and visiting. Get to know the team. Some of the complexities of if you have an outsourcer that's quite some distance away, it's perhaps not so feasible. But we're always very open and encouraging of trying to get our clients to come and visit us, come and see where we're based, come and see the offices, the facilities we have. And it's also actually quite a relatively inexpensive way of testing out who that company are. They're not just some faceless individual behind email, that you actually get to see who they are, where they work. You get to see the environment the developers are in, and just a really good way of starting that relationship.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. A good way of building that relationship, I think, initially. Okay, another good one. Why do I need to pay for a project manager? Shouldn't that be included?
Oh, that's a great question. I touched on this a little bit on one of the questions, but the project isn't just about writing code. It is about delivering a solution for your company. And if you are focused on, I need to deliver this by this date and in this budget, part of that project is having someone who is managing those milestones and ensuring that all of the work that is being done feeds into those business objectives. It is a huge part of that project. If you want to provide your own project manager, then you absolutely can do that, but you need to have somebody who takes on that responsibility. We have a lot of clients who perhaps don't want to, or maybe would prefer to have someone who's been trained in actually properly managing projects. So we do provide project managers, and it's a full-time job. It's not something that a developer does part-time. It's a full-time job orchestrating all of the work, and becoming also that liaison between you, the client, the team of developers, and someone who understands the work, also understands the business aspect of what you're doing. So yes, we have that as an option as an individual, that yes, it's it is a separate individual's role.
It's a role on a team, definitely.
Yeah,
exactly.
I hope that answers the question.
Okay, so there was another question. Do you recommend on-site visits? I think you sort of covered that before, but I think if you can, if it's not too far away and it's feasible, it's definitely worth it to meet the team.
And we've also had our clients that have encouraged our developers to come and visit them. You know, it is great that you can have, you know, a team of people almost anywhere in the world working with you, but it's always better if you can at least occasionally meet face to face. So we also have it where some of our clients will, you know, a couple of times a year get the team all together. They will invite them to the Christmas parties, but they'll get them together in the office. The advantage for us is that we're not that far away. You know, if we've got clients in the UK and Europe, it's only a couple of hours on a flight. But you know, it can work both ways. Yes, come and visit the outsourcer, but also, you know, have a conversation with the outsourcer about your developers coming and joining team meetings, Christmas parties, you know, really integrating as a team.
Yeah, definitely. I think meeting face to face is really powerful. Okay, how can we ensure that projects remain on track and within budget? Yeah, I mean, well, okay, so I think we've covered that a little bit already by talking about kind of the importance of a project manager. I think the other thing that I will say is that it's really important to clarify those expectations up front. So make sure you get it, you know, well documented in, you know, a statement of work or a contract that both parties have actually read and talked through and understand, so that everyone's really clear about what you're trying to achieve and when, with some clear milestones as well. And then I think once you've got that agreed up front, you're much more likely to be able to hit them as well if everyone understands kind of what the goals are. Although, as we said before, you definitely need a project manager to help you do that. Yeah. Okay, and then we just had one added here, but what does this say? Okay, I love that you ensure a good level of English communication. How do you manage to maintain good client development team communication?
Oh, that's a good question. I'll answer that. You know, that's actually my role here is to sort of help facilitate that. You know, I'm the conduit between the client and the company. You know, I approach it very much that my role is to be the face of the client and to support them, and you know, their interests, you know, their objectives. I check in with them on officially every month, but actually far more frequently. You know, it's just having a constant line of communication of how are things working out? Are you happy with our engagement? Is there anything that could be improved? It is a working relationship. You know, there should be that continual dialogue. Equally, the development teams, you know, they have their stand-ups. You know, they're in constant communication around what they're doing within that given sprint, but you know, how that feeds into the overall goal, making sure that we're on track, we're on time, and then having the retrospectives afterwards. You know, has everything gone to plan? Is there anything that we could have done differently? You know, it's very iterative. It's, you know, it's a continual communication, and yet we do all of that in English, so that you know the client can, you know, feel that everything is open and just, you know, able to be discussed about the whole team. So,
yeah, definitely. I think like making sure that the developers are talking directly to the client is super important. It helps everyone understand kind of what the requirements are and get better outputs.
Yeah, we also have Slack channels that we have with all of the clients and the developers that, you know, can be, and they're used in English, but it's a way that, you know, problems can be just communicated about continually. Project milestones, you know, there is constant communication. We do not operate in a way that it's, you know, you only speak to me and you don't speak to the developers, because that doesn't work. You know, that doesn't benefit anyone. So yeah, continual open communication.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. I think that's all of the questions, and we're just about on time. Short and sweet webinar today. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming. You've got all of our contact details in the chat, and hope to see you at another webinar soon.
Oh, brilliant.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.